The silence of the dusty frontier town was broken by the sound of dirt being shoveled onto a pine box. Delia Vaughn stood motionless as the afternoon sun beat down on her black mourning dress, watching as the last physical remnants of her life with Thomas disappeared beneath the dry Arizona soil. Sweat trickled down her neck, but she barely noticed, her mind swirling with grief and a growing sense of panic about what would come next. "Mrs. Vaughn," the undertaker said softly, removing his hat. "I'm mighty sorry for your loss." Delia nodded, unable to form words. Thomas had been gone just 3 days, taken by a fever that swept through him with terrifying speed. They'd been married 5 years, coming west from Pennsylvania with dreams of building a ranch. Now, at 24, she was alone in Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1882. The small gathering of townsfolk began to disperse, offering condolences as they passed. Delia accepted their words with quiet dignity, though inside she was crumbling. She had no family here, no real friends yet, just acquaintances in a town where they'd lived barely 8 months. When the last person had gone, she remained by the fresh mound of earth, her slender fingers clutching a handkerchief. "Mrs. Vaughn." A deep voice broke through her thoughts. "The sun's getting powerful hot. Let me take you home." She turned to find Sheriff Roy Billings standing nearby, his weathered face creased with concern. She'd met him only a handful of times since arriving in Copper Creek. "Thank you, Sheriff," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He offered his arm and led her to a waiting wagon. The ride to her small ranch on the outskirts of town was silent. Delia stared at the passing landscape without seeing it, her mind replaying memories of Thomas laughing, Thomas building their modest cabin, Thomas promising her that coming west had been the right decision. When they arrived at the ranch, Sheriff Billings helped her down from the wagon. "Is there anything you need, madam? Anyone I can send for?" Delia shook her head. "No, thank you, I'll be fine." It was a lie, but what else could she say? That she had no idea how she would manage. That Thomas had taken most of their savings to purchase cattle that had subsequently died from drought. That she had barely enough money to last a month. After the sheriff departed, Delia entered the cabin and closed the door. Only then did she allow the tears to fall freely. She slid down against the rough wooden door until she was sitting on the floor, her black dress pooling around her. Their home suddenly felt enormous and empty. The next morning arrived with cruel brightness. Delia rose from a bed where she'd barely slept, her eyes swollen from crying. She made herself tea and sat at the small table where she and Thomas had shared meals. A stack of papers caught her attention: bills, receipts, loan documents. With trembling hands, she began to sort through them. What she discovered made her stomach clench with fear. Thomas had borrowed heavily to keep their struggling ranch afloat. There was a loan from the bank in town, payment due in 2 weeks. Another from the general store owner. And worst of all, a high-interest loan from Harlan Webb, the wealthy rancher whose land bordered theirs. Delia's hands shook as she calculated the total. Nearly $800 owed a fortune she had no means of paying. The realization crashed over her. She would lose everything. For 2 days, Delia barely left the cabin, moving through a fog of grief and anxiety. On the 3rd day, a knock at the door startled her from her daze. She smoothed her hair and straightened her dress before answering. A tall man stood on her porch, hat in hand. She recognized him vaguely: Lucas Keller, one of the hands from the neighboring Triple Diamond Ranch. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered. "I wanted to offer my condolences about your husband." "Thank you, Mr. Keller," Delia replied formally, trying to maintain her composure. She'd seen him in town occasionally, noticed his quiet confidence and the respect other men seemed to show him despite his relative youth. He couldn't be more than 30, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "I also wanted to check if you needed anything. It can't be easy running this place alone." His directness surprised her. Most people in town had been careful, almost timid in their offers of assistance. "I'm managing, thank you," she said automatically, the words hollow even to her own ears. Lucas Keller studied her face for a moment too long, as if he could see right through her brave front. "Well, if you change your mind, my cabin's just over the ridge. I've got some experience with cattle and repairs." After he left, Delia leaned against the doorframe, unexpectedly touched by his offer. But pride kept her from accepting help. She was determined to find her own solution. The next day, Delia rode into town, dressed in her best skirt and blouse despite the heat. Her first stop was the bank, where she hoped to negotiate an extension on Thomas's loan. The bank manager, Howard Simmons, was polite but unmoved by her situation. "I'm truly sorry for your loss, Mrs. Vaughn, but business is business. The loan comes due next week. Without collateral or means of repayment, I'm afraid we'll have to begin foreclosure proceedings." From the bank, Delia went to the general store, where owner Frank Miller was more sympathetic but equally unable to help. "I'd extend your credit if I could, Mrs. Vaughn, but times are tight for everyone. Maybe you could sell some of your husband's belongings." By the time she reached Harlan Webb's office above the saloon, Delia's hope was fading. Webb was a large man with small eyes that assessed her coldly. "Your husband borrowed $500 at 15% interest," Webb said, leaning back in his chair. "That's coming due at the end of the month. Mr. Webb, I simply need more time," Delia said, forcing strength into her voice. "The ranch will turn a profit, but Mrs. Vaughn," he interrupted, "that land has potential, but not in your hands. A woman alone can't run a cattle operation." His eyes moved over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Though I might be willing to forgive the debt for other considerations." Delia stood abruptly. "I believe we're finished here." Webb's laughter followed her down the stairs. Outside on the boardwalk, Delia paused to collect herself. The town bustled around her cowboys leading horses, merchants unloading supplies, women shopping, everyone with purpose and direction, while her own life seemed to be unraveling. "Mrs. Vaughn." She turned to find Lucas Keller watching her with concern. He stood beside his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that towered over the other mounts tied at the hitching post. "Mr. Keller," she acknowledged, quickly brushing away a tear that had escaped. "Is everything all right?" he asked, stepping closer. "Perfectly fine," she lied. Lucas studied her face again with that disconcerting intensity. "Let me buy you lunch," he offered suddenly. "The hotel serves a decent stew on Thursdays." Delia's first instinct was to refuse, but hunger and loneliness won out over pride. "That would be acceptable, thank you." Over bowls of beef stew at the hotel restaurant, Delia found herself slowly relaxing. Lucas was easy to talk to, asking about her life before Arizona without prying into painful subjects. "Pennsylvania must seem a world away from here," he remarked. "It does." "I never imagined I'd end up in a place like this," Delia admitted. "My father was a professor at a girls' school. I grew up around books and learning, not cattle and dust storms." "How did you meet your husband?" Lucas asked. "Thomas was studying law. He came to deliver a package to my father." Delia smiled at the memory. "He kept finding reasons to return. Eventually, he admitted he'd been volunteering to make deliveries just to see me." Sounds like a determined man. He was. When he decided to come west, nothing would change his mind. He had visions of building a cattle empire. Her smile faded. Reality proved more challenging than his dreams. Lucas nodded. "The land out here can be unforgiving, but also rewarding if you understand its ways. And do you understand its ways?" "Been trying to since I was 16, he said. "Worked ranches from Texas to Montana before settling here. Triple Diamond's a good outfit, fair pay, decent men." Delia hesitated, then asked, "Is Mr. Webb involved with Triple Diamond?" She'd heard rumors that Webb had investments in several local businesses. Lucas's expression darkened. "Webb has no connection to Triple Diamond, thankfully. Jefferson Davis, the owner, makes a point of keeping his distance from Webb's dealings." "I see," Delia said quietly. "Webb's been causing you trouble." Lucas's voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Delia looked down at her bowl. "Just business matters." Before Lucas could respond, the bank manager entered the restaurant and spotted Delia. His face registered surprise at seeing her with Lucas Keller. "Mrs. Vaughn," Simmons said, approaching their table. "I hope you're reconsidering our conversation from earlier." "The bank cannot extend any more time." Delia felt her face flush with embarrassment. "Mr. Simmons, I don't believe this is the appropriate—" "How much?" Lucas interrupted, his voice level. "Pardon." Simmons blinked. "How much does Mrs. Vaughn owe the bank, Mr. Keller, this is hardly $250, Delia said quietly, plus interest. Lucas reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded packet of bills. He counted out $300 and handed it to the stunned banker. This covers the loan in full, Lucas said. I'll expect a receipt delivered to Mrs. Vaughn by tomorrow. Simmons stared at the money in his hand. Well, yes, of course. After the banker left, Delia stared at Lucas, stunned and mortified. Mr. Keller, I cannot accept. You're not accepting anything, he said firmly. It's an investment. I've been looking to put money into a promising operation. My ranch is hardly promising, she said bitterly. We lost half our cattle to drought and disease. Land with water access in this territory is always valuable, Lucas countered. And you seem like a woman who doesn't give up easily. Delia felt overwhelmed. Why would you do this? You barely know me. Let's just say I know what it's like to face impossible odds, he said simply. Now, shall we discuss your other debts? Despite her protests, by the end of the meal, Lucas had insisted on paying Frank Miller's loan as well. Delia reluctantly agreed only after Lucas structured it as a business arrangement he would invest in her ranch in exchange for a small percentage of future profits. That still leaves Webb, Delia said as they walked to their horses. Webb is a different matter, Lucas acknowledged. $500 is substantial and he's not a man who lets go easily. Let me think on it. As they mounted their horses, Delia studied Lucas Keller with new eyes. He sat easily in the saddle, his movements fluid and natural. Though not conventionally handsome, his face was striking strong jaw, straight nose, and those unusual gray eyes beneath dark brows. His light brown hair curled slightly where it met his collar. Thank you, she said suddenly. Not many would help a stranger this way. We're not strangers anymore, Mrs. Vaughn, he replied with a slight smile. And out here, neighbors look after one another. It's how we survive. As they rode out of town together, Delia felt something she hadn't expected, a small spark of hope flickering to life amid the ashes of her grief. The following days brought unexpected activity to Delia's quiet ranch. Lucas arrived early one morning with tools and supplies, offering to help repair the roof and fence that had been damaged in the last storm. Despite her initial reluctance, Delia found herself grateful for his assistance. You don't have to do this, she said, watching as he skillfully replaced broken fence posts. I told you it's an investment, Lucas replied, hammering a nail with precise force. Can't have my business partner's operation falling apart. Delia couldn't help but smile at his stubborn insistence on treating their arrangement as strictly business. It preserved her pride while allowing her to accept help she desperately needed. As they worked side by side, Delia learned more about Lucas Keller. He'd grown up in Missouri, the son of a blacksmith. When the war came, his father joined the Union Army and never returned. At 16, Lucas had headed west, working wherever he could find employment. Triple Diamond's been my home for 3 years now, he explained as they paused for water. Mr. Davis treats his men fair, lets me keep my own small herd on his land, build up something for myself. You want your own ranch someday? Delia asked. Lucas nodded. Every cowboy dreams of it, few make it happen. And what about family, a wife, children? The question slipped out before Delia could stop herself. If Lucas was surprised by her forwardness, he didn't show it. Haven't found the right woman yet, I suppose, or maybe just never stayed in one place long enough to try. He glanced at her. What about you? Did you and Thomas plan to have children? We did, Delia said softly. It just never happened. Lucas seemed about to say more when the sound of approaching horses interrupted them. 3 riders appeared on the road, Harlan Webb and 2 of his men. Lucas immediately moved to stand beside Delia as Webb dismounted and approached. Mrs. Vaughn, Webb said, ignoring Lucas. I've come to discuss our business arrangement. Mrs. Vaughn is busy right now, Lucas said, his voice calm but firm. Webb finally acknowledged him with a cold stare. Keller didn't realize Jefferson Davis let his hands moonlight. My time is my own when I'm not working Triple Diamond land, Webb smirked. And how interesting you choose to spend it here. His gaze shifted back to Delia. Mrs. Vaughn, your payment is due in 2 weeks. I wanted to remind you of our alternative arrangement. Lucas stepped forward. Any business with Mrs. Vaughn can go through me. I've taken a financial interest in this property. Webb's expression hardened. Have you now? Well, that changes things. He looked between them. $500 plus interest, not a day late, or I'll take the land. He returned to his horse. And Keller, Jefferson Davis might be interested to know one of his hands is getting involved with a grieving widow. Doesn't seem proper. After they rode away, Delia turned to Lucas. You shouldn't have antagonized him. He's dangerous. So am I when necessary, Lucas replied evenly. And I don't appreciate his insinuations about you. Delia felt a rush of gratitude for his defense, even as worry crept in. I don't want to cause trouble between you and your employer. Davis isn't the type to listen to Webb's gossip, Lucas assured her. But we do need to figure out how to deal with that loan. Over the next few days, Lucas continued helping around the ranch while also fulfilling his duties at Triple Diamond. Delia found herself watching for his arrival each morning, enjoying his company more than she cared to admit. It had been only 2 weeks since Thomas's death, and the guilt she felt at these new feelings confused and troubled her. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day of work, Delia finally voiced her concerns. People in town are talking, she said quietly. About us. About how quickly after Thomas's death I've allowed another man to become involved in my affairs. Lucas was silent for a moment, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. Does that bother you, what people say? It shouldn't, Delia admitted. But it does. Not for my sake, but for Thomas's memory, and for yours, your reputation. My reputation can withstand a few wagging tongues, Lucas said with a slight smile. As for Thomas, would he have wanted you to face this alone, to lose everything you built together? Delia considered this. No, he wouldn't have. Then we continue. And the gossips can find something else to occupy themselves with eventually. Lucas stretched his long legs out before him. There's a cattle auction in Silver Springs next week. I'm thinking of bringing some of my small herd to sell. Could fetch enough to cover Webb's loan. Lucas, no, Delia protested. You've done more than enough. I can't let you sell your cattle for me. Not for you, he corrected. For our business partnership, and it would only be 3 or 4 head. I've been meaning to cull the herd anyway. Before Delia could argue further, the sound of gunshots echoed from the direction of the main road. They both jumped to their feet. Stay here, Lucas ordered, reaching for the rifle he'd propped against the wall. No, Delia said firmly, grabbing her own shotgun from inside the door. This is my property. Together they moved cautiously toward the road. In the fading light they could make out a stagecoach stopped about 100 yards away. 3 masked men on horseback surrounded it, while the driver lay motionless on the ground. Robbery, Lucas whispered. We need to help, but carefully. Follow my lead. They approached using the cover of trees and brush. When they were close enough, Lucas fired a warning shot into the air. That's far enough, he shouted. Sheriff's been alerted. Throw down your weapons. It was a bluff. The sheriff was miles away in town, but it worked on one of the robbers, who immediately fled. The other 2 turned and fired in Lucas and Delia's direction. Lucas pushed Delia down behind a fallen log as bullets splintered the wood above them. When I move left, you fire right, Lucas instructed. Just to keep their heads down, I'll try to circle behind them. Delia nodded, her heart pounding. As Lucas slipped away, she waited for his signal, a bird call that cut through the evening air. She immediately rose and fired 2 shots to the right of the stagecoach. The robbers ducked for cover, and in that moment, Lucas emerged from behind them. Drop your weapons, he commanded. One man complied immediately. The other swung his gun toward Lucas, who fired first, hitting the man's shoulder. The wounded robber dropped his weapon, cursing. Within minutes, Lucas had both men tied to the stagecoach wheel. Delia tended to the driver, who was beginning to regain consciousness, having been struck from behind. Inside the coach, a terrified family of 4 father, mother, and 2 young children gradually emerged when assured the danger had passed. You saved our lives, the father said, shaking Lucas's hand vigorously. And our valuables. We're relocating to Tucson with everything we own. Just happened to be in the right place, Lucas replied modestly. Delia helped the mother calm the children while Lucas and the father secured the would-be robbers more thoroughly. Once the driver was well enough to continue, Lucas provided directions to the nearest safe stopover and promised to notify the sheriff about the captured outlaws. As the stagecoach disappeared down the road, Lucas turned to Delia. "You handled yourself well back there." "I grew up learning to shoot," she explained. "My father believed women should know how to defend themselves, never thought I'd need to use those skills like this." Lucas nodded approvingly. Not many women would have kept their nerve in a gunfight. "Not many men would have intervened to help strangers," she countered. Something changed between them that night. A mutual respect born in crisis, a recognition of shared values. As they walked back to the ranch in the gathering darkness, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Delia felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. 2 days later, Sheriff Billings rode out to take Delia's statement about the attempted robbery. The outlaws had been identified as part of a gang that had been plaguing the territory for months. "You and Keller did this county a service," Billings said. "There's a reward for these men, $500. Delia's eyes widened. $500. Yep. Take a week or so to process the paperwork, but it's yours. Split with Keller, I reckon." After the sheriff left, Delia rode immediately to Triple Diamond to find Lucas. She found him in the stables, brushing down his horse. $500, she announced without preamble. "The reward for the outlaws, it's exactly what I owe Webb." Lucas grinned. "Well, now, that's a stroke of luck." "It's more than luck," Delia said, impulsively taking his hands. "It's because of you, all of it saving my ranch, helping me rebuild, and now this. I don't know how to thank you." Lucas looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. Something intense flickered in his eyes. "You don't need to thank me, Delia." It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "I should go," she said suddenly, releasing his hands. "I just wanted you to know about the reward." "Delia," Lucas called as she turned to leave. "Come to the Founders' Day dance with me, Saturday night." The invitation caught her off guard. The annual dance was a major social event in Copper Creek. "I'm still in mourning," she said hesitantly. "It wouldn't be proper." "Just as friends," Lucas clarified. "Partners, celebrating our outlaw catching success." Delia knew she should refuse. She was still wearing black, still officially grieving, but something in Lucas's steady gaze made her nod. "As friends, yes." Saturday evening arrived with a flurry of nerves Delia hadn't expected. She'd set aside her full mourning dress for a dark blue gown she rarely wore. It felt strange to dress for a social occasion after weeks of grief, but also liberating. When Lucas arrived to escort her, his appreciative glance made her blush. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Lucas himself had made an effort, wearing a clean white shirt and dark vest beneath his usual coat. His hair was neatly combed, and Delia noticed for the first time a small scar running along his jawline. The town hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers. A local band played lively tunes as couples whirled around the dance floor. When Delia entered with Lucas, she felt the stares and whispers immediately. Widow Vaughn, barely a month after burying her husband, attending a dance with another man. "Ignore them," Lucas murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "We have as much right to be here as anyone." They found a table with some of the Triple Diamond hands and their partners. Jefferson Davis, the ranch owner, a dignified man in his 50s, greeted Delia warmly. "Mrs. Vaughn, I've heard nothing but good things about you from Lucas here. Brave action with those stagecoach robbers." "Lucas did the brave part," Delia replied. "I just followed his lead." "Not how he tells it," Davis said with a knowing smile. "Says you're as steady with a shotgun as any man he's known." The evening progressed pleasantly. Delia danced with several of the ranch hands, finding unexpected joy in the movement and music. But it was the dances with Lucas that left her breathless, his confident lead, the respectful yet undeniable heat in his eyes when he held her. During a break in the music, Lucas brought her a cup of punch. They stood near an open window, grateful for the cool night breeze. "Thank you for convincing me to come," Delia said. "I'd forgotten what it's like to simply enjoy an evening." "You deserve joy, Delia," Lucas said quietly. "Thomas would have wanted that for you." Before she could respond, Harlan Webb approached, his usual cronies flanking him. Delia tensed immediately, Mrs. Vaughn, Webb said, his gaze moving deliberately over her. Surprising to see you here so soon after your bereavement, though perhaps not given your companion. His tone made the words sound distasteful, Mr. Webb, Delia acknowledged coolly. I trust you're prepared to settle your account on Monday. In full, the money will be delivered to your office, she confirmed. Webb smirked. See that it is. He glanced at Lucas. Interesting how quickly some women find consolation, isn't it, Keller? Lucas stepped forward, but Delia placed a restraining hand on his arm. Mr. Webb, she said clearly, my financial arrangements are no longer your concern. Once your loan is repaid, our business will be concluded. Webb's eyes narrowed. This territory has a way of reminding folks of their place, Mrs. Vaughn, especially those who forget it. With that, he moved away, disappearing into the crowd. I don't like his threats, Lucas said, watching Webb's retreating form. Once he's paid, he'll have no reason to bother me, Delia reasoned, though she felt uneasy. The incident cast a brief shadow over the evening, but as the band struck up a waltz, Lucas drew her onto the dance floor. The melody was sweet and melancholy, and as they moved together, Delia felt the world around them fade away. There was only Lucas's strong hand at her waist, his eyes holding hers, the undeniable connection growing between them. When the dance ended, Lucas didn't release her immediately. I think we should step outside for some air, he suggested. In the quiet darkness behind the town hall, beneath a star-filled sky, Delia felt both vulnerable and safe. Lucas stood close, his presence solid and reassuring. Delia, he began, his voice unusually hesitant. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving, but I want you to know that my feelings for you have become more than friendship, more than a business arrangement. Delia's heart raced. Lucas, you don't need to say anything, he hurried on. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Delia looked up at him, this man who had come into her life when she'd been at her lowest point, who had helped her without asking for anything in return, who looked at her with respect and something deeper, something that made her feel truly seen. I don't know what I'm ready for, she admitted. Everything has happened so fast. Thomas, the debts, meeting you. Sometimes I feel guilty for even smiling when he's been gone such a short time. Lucas nodded. I understand, and I'll wait, however long it takes. In that moment, with the music floating softly from the hall and the desert night wrapped around them like velvet, Delia made a decision. She stepped forward and placed her hand gently against Lucas's cheek. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Then she rose on tiptoe and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. It lasted only a moment, but in that brief connection, Delia felt something she thought she'd never feel again, the stirring of new love, fragile but undeniable. Monday morning brought reality crashing back. Delia rode into town to deliver Webb's money, the reward having been processed, quickly thanks to Sheriff Billings's intervention. Lucas had offered to accompany her, but she insisted on handling this final debt herself. Webb's office was empty when she arrived. His clerk directed her to the saloon, where Webb conducted much of his business. Delia hesitated. Respectable women didn't enter saloons, but her determination to end this chapter overrode convention. The Golden Nugget Saloon was relatively quiet at this hour. A few men nursed drinks at scattered tables, while a bored-looking woman in a gaudy dress leaned against the bar. Harlan Webb sat at a corner table, playing solitaire. Heads turned as Delia entered, conversations halting mid-sentence. She ignored the stares and walked directly to Webb's table. Mrs. Vaughn, Webb said, not bothering to stand. How unexpected. I've come to repay the loan, Delia said firmly, placing an envelope on the table. $500 plus $75 interest. I've had the amount verified by the bank manager, and I expect a receipt confirming the debt is paid in full. Webb opened the envelope and counted the money slowly. Well, the widow delivers. His eyes lifted to hers. And how exactly did you come by such a sum so suddenly? Your cowboy friend must be very generous. The money is from the reward for capturing the stagecoach robbers, Delia said coldly. Now my receipt, please. Webb gestured to his clerk, who hurriedly wrote out a document. After signing it with a flourish, Webb handed it to Delia. Our business is concluded, Mr. Webb, she said, tucking the receipt safely away. Perhaps. Webb's smile didn't reach his eyes. But I wonder if your cowboy knows what he's gotten himself into. Triple Diamond's doing well, but Jefferson Davis isn't getting any younger. Man his age, accident could happen anytime. Is that a threat? An observation, Mrs. Vaughn. This territory belongs to those strong enough to hold it. Webb leaned forward. You should consider selling that ranch while you still can. Before you discover how inhospitable this land can be to those who don't understand its rules. Delia met his gaze steadily. I understand one rule perfectly, Mr. Webb. I won't be intimidated by men like you. She turned and walked out of the saloon with her head high, though her hands trembled slightly. Webb's veiled threats concerned her, not for herself but for Lucas, and potentially even Jefferson Davis. Webb was known for his ruthlessness in business matters, and his interest in expanding his holdings was no secret. As Delia rode home, her mind was so preoccupied with Webb's warning that she almost didn't notice the smoke rising from the direction of her ranch. When realization struck, she urged her horse to a gallop, fear clutching at her throat. By the time she reached her property, the small barn was engulfed in flames. 2 ranch hands from Triple Diamond were already there, working frantically to prevent the fire from spreading to the cabin or grassland. What happened? Delia cried, dismounting. Don't know, madam, one man shouted over the roar of the flames. Saw the smoke from across the ridge and rode over. Nobody was here when we arrived. For hours, they battled the blaze, finally containing it to the barn, which was destroyed. Exhausted and smoke-smeared, Delia slumped on her porch steps as the men ensured no embers remained to reignite. Lucas arrived at a gallop, having been informed by one of the hands. He took in the scene with a quick, assessing glance, then knelt before Delia. Are you hurt? She shook her head. I wasn't here. I was in town paying Webb. Something dark flashed across Lucas's face. Webb, he repeated. And right after you paid him off, your barn mysteriously catches fire. We don't know it was him, Delia cautioned, though she'd had the same thought. I know. Lucas's jaw was tight with anger. Just like I know he's been pushing small ranchers out all across the territory. Accidents, threatening notes, livestock going missing. Delia reached for his hand. The barn can be rebuilt. The cabin is safe. That's what matters. Lucas squeezed her fingers gently. I'm staying here tonight, and I'm talking to Jefferson Davis tomorrow. It's time someone stood up to Webb and his tactics. That night, Lucas slept on Delia's porch, rifle across his lap. Despite her protests that it wasn't necessary, she felt safer knowing he was there. In the morning, they surveyed the damage in the harsh light of day. The barn was a total loss, along with the tools and feed stored inside. I'll need to rebuild before winter, Delia said, calculating costs in her mind, and replace the tools. We'll manage it, Lucas assured her. After breakfast, he prepared to ride to Triple Diamond to speak with Davis. Lock the doors while I'm gone and keep your shotgun handy. I'll be back by sundown. Delia watched him ride away, a tall figure against the morning sky. His use of "we" hadn't escaped her notice, nor had the warm feeling it created in her chest. Somehow, in the midst of tragedy and hardship, something beautiful was growing between them, something she hadn't expected to find again. Lucas returned that evening with encouraging news. Jefferson Davis had agreed to meet with several small ranchers who had experienced similar accidents after refusing to sell to Webb. Davis has influence with the territorial governor, Lucas explained over dinner. If we can document a pattern of intimidation, the authorities might finally take action. Webb will deny everything, Delia pointed out, and his men are loyal. Not all of them, Lucas said with a slight smile. One of his former hands works for Triple Diamond now, man named Peterson. Says he left Webb's employ because he didn't like some of the orders he was given. Davis thinks he might be willing to testify. For the first time, Delia felt a glimmer of hope that Webb might face consequences for his actions, but she also knew that cornered predators were the most dangerous. Over the following weeks, Lucas split his time between his duties at Triple Diamond and helping Delia rebuild her barn. Other ranchers and townspeople, hearing of her situation, contributed lumber, tools, and labor. What had begun as a tragedy transformed into a demonstration of community support that touched Delia deeply. As they worked side by side, The connection between Delia and Lucas deepened. Their conversations ranged from childhood memories to dreams for the future, discovering shared values and complementary differences. Lucas's steady presence became something Delia relied on, even as she maintained her independence in running the ranch. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Delia found the courage to address the growing feelings between them. "Lucas," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what you said at the dance." He turned to face her, his expression guarded but hopeful. "Yes, when Thomas died, I thought my life was over, that I'd never feel happiness again." Delia took a deep breath. "But these past weeks with you, you've shown me there can be a future I didn't imagine." Lucas reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Delia, I've grown to care for you more than I thought possible, but I don't want to rush you." "You haven't," she assured him. "You've been patient and respectful. And I've realized that what I feel for you isn't a betrayal of Thomas's memory. It's something new, something different but equally real." Lucas's smile was like sunrise breaking across his features. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. But Delia met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that started gentle and quickly deepened with shared longing. When they finally parted, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I think I've been waiting for you my whole life," he whispered. "And I never expected to find you," she replied. "But I'm grateful every day that I did." Their newfound happiness provided strength for the challenges that lay ahead. The meeting with Jefferson Davis and the other affected ranchers resulted in a formal complaint being filed with the territorial governor's office. Peterson, Webb's former employee, provided testimony about specific instances of sabotage and intimidation. Webb, predictably, responded with increased hostility. Delia found threatening notes nailed to her door. Twice, she spotted Webb's men watching her property from a distance. Lucas worried constantly about her safety when he couldn't be with her. "Move to Triple Diamond temporarily," he urged. "Davis has offered you a cabin until this is resolved," but Delia refused. "If I leave, Webb wins. This is my home, Lucas. I won't be driven from it." Their standoff with Webb came to a head on a stormy October night. Delia was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. She grabbed her shotgun and moved cautiously toward the front room, where she found two masked men climbing through a shattered window. "Stop right there," she commanded, aiming the shotgun. One man froze, but the other lunged toward her. Delia fired, the blast catching him in the shoulder. He fell back with a cry of pain as his companion fled into the night. Outside, she heard hoofbeats as more riders approached, but it was Lucas and two Triple Diamond hands, who had been patrolling nearby after receiving warnings that Webb was planning something. They secured the wounded intruder, who turned out to be one of Webb's regular associates. Sheriff Billings was summoned, and by morning the man was in custody, his wound treated by the town doctor. "He'll live to stand trial," Billings informed them grimly. "And he's talking. Says Webb ordered him to scare you, Mrs. Vaughn, make it look like a robbery gone wrong." "Will his testimony be enough?" Lucas asked. "Combined with Peterson's statement and the evidence from other ranchers, yes. I've wired the territorial marshal. They're sending a deputy to take Webb into custody." 2 days later, Harlan Webb was arrested on multiple charges of conspiracy, intimidation, and attempted murder. The news spread quickly through Copper Creek, met with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Webb had seemed untouchable for so long that many couldn't quite believe justice was finally being served. For Delia, the arrest brought a sense of closure. The threat that had hung over her since Thomas's death was finally lifted. As she and Lucas stood on her porch, watching the autumn leaves dance in the breeze, she felt truly at peace for the first time in months. "What happens now?" she asked, leaning against his solid strength. Lucas's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Now we build something together." "If that's what you want." Delia turned in his embrace to face him. "It is what I want, but I need to ask you something important. Anything. Are you staying at Triple Diamond, or did you mean what you said about wanting your own ranch someday?" Lucas studied her face. "I've been saving for my own place for years. Davis knows my intentions. Why do you ask?" Because I have a ranch, Delia said simply. One that's too much for me to manage alone, but with the right partner. Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. Are you proposing a merger, Mrs. Vaughn? He asked, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Of sorts, she replied with answering humor. Then more seriously, I'm proposing a life together, Lucas, here on this land that means so much to both of us now, building something that's ours. Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his expression filled with tenderness and joy. Delia Vaughn, I would be honored to build a life with you, to work this land to face whatever comes together. Their kiss sealed the promise between them not just of partnership, but of a deep and abiding love born in adversity and strengthened through shared purpose. The weeks that followed were busy with preparations. Lucas gave notice at Triple Diamond, though Jefferson Davis insisted he remain until after the winter cattle drive. They decided to marry in the spring, when the wildflowers would carpet the hills around the ranch with color. Are you sure you don't want to marry sooner? Lucas asked one evening as they discussed their plans. People will talk, Delia laughed. People already talk. Let them. I want our wedding to be a celebration of new beginnings, not rushed because of propriety. Lucas agreed, though he took to spending most nights on her porch, rather than returning to his cabin at Triple Diamond, a compromise between propriety and his desire to ensure her safety. As winter settled over the territory, bringing crisp, cold days and star-filled nights, Delia and Lucas fell into a comfortable rhythm. They worked the ranch together, making plans for expanding the cattle herd in the spring and adding a new room to the cabin. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading or talking, discovering new depths to their connection with each passing day. One night, as snow fell gently outside, Delia found herself studying Lucas's profile as he read by lamplight. The strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows, the way his hair curled at his temples all had become dear and familiar to her. I love you, she said quietly. Lucas looked up, his eyes warm with emotion. And I love you, Delia, more than I have words to express. I never thought I'd feel this way again, she admitted. After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. Lucas set aside his book and took her hands. Life has a way of surprising us, of giving second chances when we least expect them. I'm grateful for mine, Delia said, leaning against him as his arm encircled her shoulders. As winter gave way to spring, their plans took shape. Webb's trial was scheduled for April in the territorial capital. Both Delia and Lucas would need to testify, but they arranged their wedding for May, after the legal proceedings would be concluded. The trial itself was a tense affair. Webb had hired expensive lawyers from back east, and the proceedings dragged on for 2 weeks. But the evidence against him was substantial, and when the jury returned, their verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. 10 years in territorial prison, Lucas informed Delia as they left the courthouse. It won't bring back what he took from others, but it's justice of a sort. And it means we can build our future without looking over our shoulders, Delia added, squeezing his hand. They returned to Copper Creek to find their wedding preparations well underway. The women of the town had taken charge of organizing the celebration, determined to make it a joyous occasion after all the hardship Delia had endured. On a perfect May morning, with the desert in bloom around them, Delia Vaughn and Lucas Keller exchanged vows beneath an arch of wildflowers on their ranch. Jefferson Davis stood as Lucas's best man, while Frank Miller's wife, Martha, attended Delia. The entire town turned out to witness their union, the same people who had once whispered about the widow and the cowboy now cheering their happiness. I, Lucas, take you, Delia, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Lucas's deep voice carried across the gathered crowd. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. Delia's voice was clear and steady as she repeated the vows, her eyes never leaving Lucas's face. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Lucas bent to kiss his bride, the applause was thunderous. The celebration lasted well into the evening with dancing and feasting under lantern light. As night fell, the guests gradually departed, leaving the newlyweds alone at last. Standing on their porch, Delia leaned against her husband's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "Mrs. Keller," Lucas murmured against her hair. "How does it sound?" "Perfect," Delia replied, turning in his embrace. Like it was always meant to be. Lucas lifted her into his arms with surprising ease, carrying her across the threshold of what was now truly their home. "To new beginnings," he said softly, "and to unexpected blessings," Delia added, bringing his lips to hers. 5 years later, the Keller ranch had prospered beyond their early hopes. Their cattle herd had tripled in size, and the once modest cabin had expanded into a comfortable home. But their greatest joy was their family, 4-year-old Thomas, named for Delia's first husband in a gesture of respect for the past, and 2-year-old Elizabeth, a spirited toddler with her father's gray eyes. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Lucas surprised Delia with a special gift, a small wooden box containing the receipts for all the debts he had paid when they first met. "Why did you keep these?" Delia asked, puzzled. "To remind me," Lucas said simply, "of how close I came to never knowing you. If I hadn't been in town that day, if I hadn't seen you looking so brave and so alone." Delia touched his face gently. "Perhaps it was always meant to be. Perhaps Thomas sent you to me somehow." Lucas covered her hand with his own. "However it happened, I thank God every day that our paths crossed." From the yard came the sound of children's laughter. Through the window, they could see Thomas chasing a butterfly while Elizabeth tottered after him on chubby legs. "Look what we've built together," Delia said softly. From such uncertain beginnings. Lucas drew her close, his kiss a promise renewed. "And this is just the beginning," he whispered against her lips. "Just the beginning of our story." As the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, the Keller family gathered on their porch, Lucas with his arm around Delia, Thomas leaning against his father's knee, Elizabeth secure in her mother's lap. Around them stretched the land they had fought for and saved, the home they had built with love and determination. And in the quiet of the evening, with the first stars beginning to appear overhead, Delia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from grief to love, from despair to joy, from a widow left penniless to a woman rich in all the ways that truly mattered. "Penny for your thoughts," Lucas said, noticing her contemplative smile. "I was just thinking," Delia replied, meeting his loving gaze, "that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings arise from what we think are endings." Lucas's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as their lives had become interwoven. "To beginnings, then," he said softly. "To beginnings," Delia agreed, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected twist of fate that had brought this man into her life when she needed him most. "And to the courage to embrace them when they come." As night fell gently over the ranch that had witnessed their struggle and their triumph, their sorrow and their joy, Lucas and Delia Keller held each other close, two souls who had found in each other not just salvation from hardship, but the rare and precious gift of a love strong enough to build a future upon. A love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and grown into something as vast and enduring as the western sky above them.